Although we have been talking about Aristotle's metaphysics, since this is metaphysics, we'll turn to a more sort of explicit focus on what we take to be metaphysics in a more strict sense. Now, the term metaphysics arose from Aristotle, not because he used the term. When he talked about what we now call metaphysics, he used the term first philosophy, obviously in the Greek. So where do we get the term metaphysics? Well, according to at least one plausible story, it arose essentially from confusion, maybe even a bit of kind of like slacking. Here's why. At some point, Aristotle's works are being edited, and the editor editing this set of works didn't know what to call a collection of works that came after physics. And so he just settled with the true but kind of, too easy name of metaphysics, which literally means after physics. Now it's come to mean like above physics or all kinds of, strange things. But as a practical matter, it just happened to be the book after physics, so-called Metaphysics. If Aristotle had written a cookbook, we might have been calling it meta-cooking or something else. And so that is the origin of the term. So what about some of his more strict metaphysics? Well, one of the things that Aristotle is well known for is his criticism of Plato and Plato's forms. So you might recall our good dead friend Plato. He regarded his forms as perfect, unchanging, and eternal. They are forever, they never change, and they're perfect. The world that we live in, the world of particulars for Plato, is a world of imperfection, of change, and mortality. And so the forms exist apart from this world of particulars. And as I mentioned before, philosophers tend to refer to it as the Platonic heaven. But there's no implication in Plato's view that there's a monotheistic God there, that it's a reward for, doing well here on earth or living a righteous life. It's just kind of expression people use to describe it. Now, from Aristotle's standpoint, the forms have some problems. Now, one problem is, going back to our, kind of methods of doing metaphysics, is explanatory power, as you might recall, is good. You want to have that if you have a theory of metaphysics, or any theory that's trying to explain things. And we also saw that complexity is generally, bad. So you want it to have power, but also be simple. So Aristotle made the argument that the forms are lacking in explanatory power. Why not? Well, according to Aristotle, they don't explain the natural world. Another problem is the complexity issue. You can also bring in Occam's razor here, about multiplying entities beyond necessity. So if you add the realm of forms, you double the realms that need to be explained. So you've got the world that we all experience, and that one, is a pretty cheap buy metaphysically, because we all experience it. So except for the extreme skeptics who doubt the existence of the world, pretty much most people would, most philosophers would, accept the intuition that, okay, there's a world around us. But when you throw in a second one, a realm beyond this one, which you supposedly only see when you're dead, that, doubles the, the need of explanation. So you got to explain this world, got to explain that other world. And of course, by Occam's razor, a good question would be, do you need that other world, this entire other, dimension? And so Aristotle also notes that rather than creating a unity, adding the forms gives more multiplicity. And he sees these as, raising the cost of the theory. But wait, there are more criticisms. Now, the forms, as Plato is quite clear about, are perfect, unchanging, and eternal. So this raises questions about what do the forms do? Given that they're unchanging, eternal, perfect, and not here, one might suspect, as Aristotle did, that they don't appear to contribute anything to the particulars. They don't seem to cause movement or change in the particulars, again, because the forms himself are changeless, perfect, and not here. So Aristotle doesn't pull any punches here. He says, if we're going to use the forms as a basis of all explanation, then, to quote a translation of him, the whole study of nature has been annihilated. So he sees it as a pretty devastating criticism. The forms don't change, they don't move, so how do they do anything here? And if you're relying on the forms to explain things and they do nothing, then that makes it impossible to study nature, or so he claimed. Now he has even more criticisms. Now, you might recall Aristotle's really big on substance, and we saw a bit about it, and we'll see more on substance in the near future. So, since these forms are separate from the particulars, on Plato's view, they're not here, they're in, again, what philosophers kind of jokingly call the Platonic heaven, but somehow they do stuff here somehow. Aristotle considers this a huge mystery. So, since the forms are not here, the form can't be the essence or substance of a thing. And the participation thing, he says, is just super mysterious. And he gives a pretty, again, doesn't pull any punches. He says, talk of participation is, to quote a translation of Aristotle, is to use empty words and poetical metaphors. To this day, critics of Plato and critics of what are called transcendent universals that exist, someplace else, follow Aristotle here. They say, what is this participation stuff? It's a huge mystery. It's meaningless. And at the very least, they would say it raises the cost of the theory considerably. Aristotle also helps himself to the third man argument, which Plato himself, brought up. And Aristotle points out, this is a pretty good objection. And he thinks that Plato can't handle this criticism that he brought up himself. So what does he conclude after all these criticisms and problems he sees with the forms? Well, he ends up rejecting the forms, at least as Plato characterizes them. He says, to quote a translation of him, "The forms we can dispense with, for they are mere sound without sense. Even if there are such things, they are not relevant to our discussion." And again, a pretty harsh philosophical attack, because he says, essentially, there's the person who talks about it is just making noise that doesn't make any sense. And in kind of a deep philosophical cut, he says, even if they did exist, they just don't matter, which in a way is even sort of more harsh than saying there are no such things. To say that even if they do exist, they just don't matter at all is, even more of an attack. So does he reject the notion of, forms small f, objective properties? Well, he does not reject those. So it's important to note that he rejects the forms, capital F, the Platonic forms, but he still accepts that there are universal objective forms, small f, that make up the essences of particulars. And these non-Platonic forms, forms small f, make knowledge possible. And the order of the world has to be explained in terms of these non-Platonic forms. So he rejects Plato's forms. So again, forms with capital F, to distinguish them from non-Platonic forms, which would be forms with the small f. So what about his substance? Well, we saw a bit of the substance before, but he really likes the substance stuff. And so in many ways, Aristotle's kind of the substance guy. So what does he say about these substances in more detail? So as we just saw, Aristotle ends up saying, forms are, mysterious, weird, and useless. So essentially saying they do nothing and they cost a lot, terrible idea. So what it ends up doing, sort of metaphorically speaking, is he's bringing these forms to earth. So Plato accepts what philosophers now call transcendent universals. And these are forms, properties that are supposed to exist outside of the world of particulars. And again, for Plato, they exist in what philosophers kind of jokingly call the Platonic heaven. So they're called transcendent because they transcend this world. They're not here. They're somewhere else. I don't mean somewhere else like they're in Australia, somewhere else like they're in another dimension or realm. So Aristotle ends up accepting what philosophers now called immanent universals. That is, that they're at hand, close at hand. They exist here in this realm of particulars. So if you were to ask Aristotle before he was dead, where are the forms, Aristotle? He would just point around and say they're all around us. Why bring them here? Well, his answer again is because of the problems he raised for Plato's transcendent universals, his Plato's forms. The only way you can have the forms, universals, being, causes and explaining things is if they are, according to Aristotle at least, constituents of things. They help make up stuff. And so for Aristotle, reality is a collection of substances. And for him, substance would be a fundamental ontological category, as we saw before. So, really important. So he rejects Plato's forms, but still accepts universals, but they're here, not somewhere else. Which is why in the classic painting The Society of Athens, Aristotle is shown, with his hand, held out, saying, essentially the forms are here, and Plato is painted as pointing up, saying that's where the points, that's where the forms are. And of course, over the years, clever people have photoshopped in various things, typically like a basketball. Plato spinning a basketball on his finger, and Aristotle doing some dribbling, in case you ever run across those. So what do these substances and forms and stuff do in his ontology? Well, there is for Aristotle a whatness and a thisness. And these are, actual metaphysical terms for him, still used today. The whatness of a thing is this. It's the properties a substance possesses. They're what makes a thing what it is in terms of types. And these are, according to Aristotle, universal properties that many things could possess. And so the whatness of a thing does not capture what is unique about it. It's not what individuates it. It doesn't make it distinct from all the things of the same type. So roughly put, the whatness are the properties of things has that say what it is generally. So, for example, if you think of like an apple, the whatness of a apple, say a red delicious, which is red but rarely delicious, would be all those properties that, make it a red delicious apple. And of course, all other red delicious apples have most of those properties. And so the whatness is what makes it a member of a particular category. So for Aristotle, if you asked, why is this apple a red delicious? He would say, well, it's because of its whatness. And you might say, what's the whatness? And he would say the whatness is the properties it possesses that makes it a red delicious apple. And it'd be a list of qualities that something would have to be a red delicious apple. And likewise for all the things. So if you have the kiwi, we'll use the example of the bird, there'd be a set of, qualities that a thing would have to be a kiwi, the bird. And this would group things into categories. So you fall into a category because of your whatness. Now what about the thisness? Well, thisness is what makes a thing this. That is to say, the thisness is what individuates the thing, what makes it distinct from all the things of the same type. So the whatness of a thing would make it a member of a class of things, like a red delicious apple, a kiwi bird, a human being, a ocelot, for all the various types and categories of things. The thisness is what would make it an individual, say being the particular red delicious apple you have, or being, Ted, the Kiwi, or being, Ozzy, the ocelot, or being a particular, human being, like Matt Damon or somebody. So you got the whatness, you got the thisness. And here's a bit more about how this works. Aristotle embraces form and matter. And again, for him, the forms are the, small f forms. They're not the Platonic forms. So the whatness of a thing would be its form, small f. So the, the qualities that it has. And the thisness would be its matter. So for Aristotle, what individuates things would be the matter that makes them up. So if you'd ask the question, why are all humans human? It would be, the form of human. Or, more likely, more plausibly, all the qualities that go into making up being human. And if you were to say, well, what is it that separates, say, Matt Damon from Joe Biden, then the answer would be the matter. That would make, Joe a distinct human being from Matt. Now, of course, individuals can have different qualities. Obviously, like Matt Damon and Joe Biden, Donald Trump, have different qualities. But what makes them distinct individuals for Aristotle would be, giving them their thisness, would be their matter. So an entity is a particular category because of its whatness, and it is its individual thing because of its matter. So essentially organized matter. Now everyone, of course, has heard of, the expression, function and form, sometimes saying, like, form follows function or function follows form, depending on which way you want to put it. Aristotle, he's a form and function guy. So why do things have the forms they do? Well, according to Aristotle, an object will have the form it does because of a particular function or purpose. And the form of a thing would be its essence. And the essence of a thing would be the set of properties that make it what it is. Now, he does note that not all forms can be fully characterized in terms of physical characteristics. There's some that cannot be. So the essence would be the set of qualities of a thing that make it the thing that it is. The matter for him would be the basis of individuation. What is this matter stuff? Well, the question of, what is matter, if you accept, material substance, becomes, once again, unsurprisingly, a matter of great debate. Pun obviously intended. So he takes matter to be the basis of individuation. So again, what separates, one human from another? How do you have two humans instead of, just one? Well, for Aristotle, it would be, different matter, different individual. And he describes matter as a collection of possibilities from which a specific thing can be actualized, can be made, going from potential, could be something, to actually being it. So matter, and the reason why I have the picture of the person, doing pottery, you can think of matter as being analogous to clay. I mean, the analogy, like all analogies, eventually kind of breaks down, really badly. But you can think of this similar way. If you're working with clay, you can work it into all kinds of different shapes. You can make a cup, an ashtray, a bottle, etc. And so matter can take on many forms. It is rich with possibilities. Now, he doesn't necessarily require that matter be a physical object in the usual sense. It could be, not that. So continuing, form and matter and substance. A particular, say a particular, red delicious apple, or a particular kiwi bird, or a particular human being like Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Matt Damon or Keanu Reeves, would consist of form and matter. Now, he doesn't take form and matter to be two parts in the sense that something is a physical part. So you wouldn't be able to, think of like a simple example, like a hot dog and a bun. They form the hot dog, because we refer to the whole thing as a hot dog. Just like with a hamburger, you got the actual burger in the bun, but that's a hamburger. So you got your hot dog sitting in the bun, forming a hot dog, and form of matter would not be like that. It's not like you can pull them apart and have form in one hand, matter in another. So forms, for him, don't exist apart from matter, unlike for Plato. For Plato, the forms they do exist outside of the matter. They exist in the Platonic heaven, again, as philosophers call it. And for Aristotle, you never have unformed, matter. Matter always has some type of form forming it. So the forms can't exist on their own, and matter will always have some sort of form. Now this ties into Aristotle's view of potentiality and actuality, which we'll talk about in the near future. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.